Welcome back, folks. This is Andy from the Poor Proles Almanac. It took me a minute to figure out how to get this thing going, so I apologize for a little bit of a late start. For having every technical difficulty you could imagine. So, first off, thanks for tuning in. I know it's a little bit later than usual, so I appreciate all of y'all that are jumping in this late. So, first, I want to introduce our guest. You can find her on Instagram at vibe.ryder. This is Miranda. Say hi.
Hello, good evening.
So today we're going to be talking about basically working with fabric, working with clothing, all the stuff I can't do because when I stitch, I just stitch my hands together and it's just not good. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to you, and hopefully I'm sure some of the folks watching are going to have some questions.
Awesome. Well, I'm embarrassingly also technologically inept, so just stop me if there are questions because I don't know where I would even see it on this interface too. Just wave or yell at me, and I'll do
That's
my
what I'm
best.
here for. I do a lot of yelling. It's fine.
I do a lot of things. I have a day job where I work with computers. I model also, and then I've been sewing for probably going on 20 years. Ever since I started hand sewing as a child. I had my first machine when I was 12, and now I have a basic machine and two industrial machines. But we're only going to talk about just basic repair, basic resizing, just the things to get you through the day, essentially. So
Awesome.
I think we're going to start with one of the things I get asked about the most, which is sewing on a button. And this is probably one of the worst examples, but it was the closest button to me. It's a clear button. So you would ideally sew it back on to where it fell off with, a hand needle and thread. And, taking your needle and threading it, tying a knot in your thread, you would come up, down, up, down, about 3 times. And then the key to making sure that it stays on is, again, clear button. Before you tie it off, you're going to want to wrap your thread around, they call it the shank of the button. You're basically making your own shank with those up, down threads when you're sewing the button back on. And that's going to make it very strong and very durable, even though you're sewing it on by hand. So that's probably one of the most common home repairs when it comes to clothing.
Well, that explains some things because I did sew a button once and it fell off like within a week.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm the worst at this. Don't let me near sharp things. This is just a bad idea.
Another thing you can do is take a smaller piece of thicker fabric. If you had a thin, delicate shirt and you were worried about your sewing creating holes in it, or maybe the button was tugging on the shirt, creating holes in that, you could take like an inch by inch square of like a denim, just like a scrap fabric, a denim, a linen, anything thicker really, and place it on like the back of your shirt. And where like the button would be on the front, you would put your patch on the back and then just sew through all the layers, and it's just going to add more extra strength, extra durability, so you can pull more on that button. Same where like if you have, jeans, or if you have a button that falls off, it probably fell off because it made a hole, so if you have to sew it back onto the hole, you're going to need something more to grab onto. So that's just a way of adding more like durability, so you can get more wear out of your clothes, because you don't want to throw away like a good shirt, a good pair of pants because it lost one button.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm one of those people that you look at me usually, especially like during the summer when I'm out doing stuff like in the fields or something, and like my pants have, my wife laughs because she's like, I can see more of your boxers than your pants because there's just holes everywhere and it's too thin to even like try to patch. But it's like if the button doesn't hold, then I can't even get to that point. So
yeah, exactly. And if you let's say there was really nothing left to grab onto there was no fabric left for you to grab on to sew your button. You could, sew it down a little bit lower, but then you'd have to make a new buttonhole a little more advanced, um, which would involve cutting on the other side. You would cut a slit and then essentially just stitch all the way around it to prevent fraying. So you would have a hole, and they call that whip stitching, where you sew around. So if you have, like if this was the edge of your fabric, you would take your needle and you would come out and then go around. And they call that a whip stitch because you're whipping your thread around your fabric. That's one of the probably more basic, I'd call like essential hand stitches. Another one is like a running stitch that just goes up and down through a fabric. And those are really the only two that I use on whenever I hand sew, because I try and avoid it as much as possible because it just takes forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like if you're trying to finish a product, it probably is not going to look as professional as like a machine finished stitch.
Oh no. And I mean there definitely are times when it's necessary. Buttons are one of the times where you kind of have to hand sew something on. There's really no good way to put, unless you have a machine that's specifically made to put buttons on and only to put buttons on, you have to do it by hand. And then if you get into, if you're really into, let's say, like costuming or cosplay or historical pieces, that's another area where you would want to hand sew, but that's again more for the sake of hand sewing too, for the effect that it leaves.
Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, so I think buttons are a big one. Patching, I think, is the other big one that folks are probably like, okay, if I need, you know, if you're ripping your pants all the time, like, and you don't really give a shit what they look like what are your options? Like, I feel like people, at least when I was a kid, it was just like you took a piece of like flannel and
Yep.
stitched it in, like, and it'd be bigger than the hole, and that was about, as a kid, that was the extent of what I understood.
Yeah, basically. So that's so there's I had that I have a whole whole I have a whole holes in fabric section in my notes. And when you have smaller holes, I'd say anything like nickel or smaller, you can use a technique called like darning, which is basically when you make your own patch with thread. And that's more so for like socks or like stretchy woolen fabrics. If you have a really nice sweater, you don't really patch a sweater. You would take like a yarn and basically weave your own patch into the sweater, if that kind of makes sense. So if you can
Yeah,
picture the whole, yeah,
so
you would
more
just
subtle. Yeah,
exactly, you would sort of like weave your own patch, just kind of like run a stitch up and down, and then kind of weave back and forth to build your own patch into it, and then it'll move with the fabric. And if you can imagine doing that to like the heel of a sock, you can do it, while it's on your hand. They make, if you can picture yourself in, like the 1800s, if you're like a housewife whose only job is to darn your 10 children's socks all day, you would have like a wooden form specifically for this, and you could like darn on like a wooden form so you could get it to have that round shape. But so that's like darning, where you don't even use a patch, you just kind of make your own patch out of a string or a thread. But then if it's like bigger, you would use a patch, and that's, yeah, where you would get a similar fabric or unsimilar if you don't really care what it looks like, and stick your patch underneath your fabric and then sew around it or back and forth for stability. Really, as long as you get the perimeter, you'll be good. And the most important thing is, if you don't care about what it looks like, that's fine. But you want to make sure that the care instructions are similar, because you don't want your patch to shrink faster than your garment or vice versa, because then you'll just have another hole in a few months or a few years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, as a kid, I don't remember paying attention to that stuff, but I
Hmm.
probably had to have a lot of patches fixed.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I feel like I can't remember the last time I saw a kid with like jeans with patches in them. So I don't know if it's a lost art or I live in nicer places than where I grew up. I don't know. It's
Yeah. Maybe it went out of style. I think like the holy jeans are in style now where your skin actually shows through.
that too. Yeah. Um, someone asked, can didn't ask, can also patch using a bunch of embroidery floss or yarn instead of a piece of fabric. I'd imagine
Hmm.
that's probably a little bit stronger too.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, and I think that would be, I'm assuming that that would be a similar to like a darning technique where they would weave it. I'm assuming that's what they mean to do with it.
Yeah, probably. Um, so yeah, maybe could you answer maybe a few questions that I have around like fundamentals of like, okay, so if I want to go start like patching and fixing stuff, like
Hmm.
what are some of the basic things? Like, can I literally just have like a couple of sewing needles or stitching needles and like some yarn thread and that's it? Or
Absolutely. So I actually have, um, I'm missing one of my sewing machines because she's at the repair shop. Pardon my mess, but this is my like battle station, I call it. I'm sorry, I'm in the camera, so the angle's weird right now. But here are my two sewing machines. This is my sewing desk. I've got random things on the wall. But the right here, I have a box. I feel like everyone keeps it in like just a random tin. And this is like my essentials tin. And it just has like a few different safety pins and just a few different size needles. And this is like my most important box because this is just everything that I need to do the basic things.
cool.
And then I always have like a few threads within arm's reach. You know, whenever I need to do like a quick thing, I know that I'll find, you know, the most important tools for the job are in this box. Really just a few safety pins, a few straight pins, and a few needles.
So why do you need different sized needles? Like I understand like a machine might require different size to get through different fabrics, but is
Mhm.
the same thing kind of plays out with like hand stitching?
Absolutely. Yeah, so
Is
you would
is there
need
like a standard size that like 99% of people this is all you're going to need and then
um I would hold them up, but I don't know if my phone can tell the
yeah,
difference.
probably not.
Also I have like I do a lot of other crafts too. So I have like some of my yarn needles are in here as well. So there's like yarn needles are a lot thicker than fabric needles. Um, you can just picture like a denim needle would be a lot thicker than like a t-shirt needle.
Is that how they're called? Are they done by size or
They're done by size on they're done by size on the sewing machine. Um, I'm not too sure. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not too sure exactly what the numbers mean. Um, they go by like 8, 12, and 16. Someone probably knows um, better than I do off the top of my head. But a lot of like hand sewing needles, when you buy them, will come in packs like this. Again, I have like everything within arm's reach, and you'll have the different sizes here, so you can kind of see. I always like to go for the biggest one, the biggest one that I can get away with, which is going to be the easiest one for me to hand thread without being too big that the thread is just going to slip right through the hole that it makes, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense.
And that usually ends up being around the same size as like the lead that goes in a mechanical pencil
Okay.
is I feel like the most common like analogy I can think of off the top of my head.
Makes sense. Um all right, so you said the biggest you can get away with and what? Look, without like damaging the fabric?
Yes, without damaging the fabric. And then if it's too big, excuse me, the knot that you tie will just pull right through, unless you tie like a giant knot.
Okay. That makes sense too. Cool. All right, so we've got the needles. It doesn't sound like you need a whole lot. You can just get some thread for the color that you want to match. Um, Now you'd mentioned like fabric and being careful about washing it when you patch stuff. Um, so is there like a rule of thumb, like what fabrics go with what, or is it just kind of like you take what you got?
So you have woven fabrics and you have knit fabrics. I'm sure you've noticed that your t-shirt is a lot stretchier than your jeans are. So your t-shirt is a knit fabric and your jeans are a woven fabric. And so you typically don't want to mix and match those because you'll get different, like your garment won't move the way it used to or move the way it's supposed to. You'll also just have like, it won't have the same durability. If you patch your jeans with a t-shirt rag, it won't be nearly as thick as it used to or as durable as it used to. This is just being even more like nitpicky. But when you have like a woven fabric, like on your jeans, you have the side to side threads and the up and down threads, and they call that the grain and the cross grain. So when you're lining up a patch, you want to try and line that up as much as possible so you don't, have it going like on a 45 or anything like that. It might just cause it to stretch weird, put stress on like the joints. That's being super picky. It's mostly just important that you don't, put a sweater patch or a t-shirt patch on your work pants or on your flannel. It once you explain it, you're like, oh yeah, that is common sense. You know.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah, it's one of those things. I have a lot of shirts that just, especially like flannel button ups, that like I'll be carrying like fence posts, and the corner of a fence post will just rip it. I'm like, all right, what am I gonna
Mhm.
do with this? Am I gonna patch it, or is it already beat up enough to not do anything with it? And then I have like a pile of stuff that I'm like, I'm gonna stitch that, and then I just don't.
Yeah.
And there's like 8 of them, and I'm just like, I should stitch those. I like those shirts, and it
Yeah.
just never happens. But then it's
They-
like, okay, with the shirts that I don't want to save, um, but I still want to use the material for something. That's where I always kind of get lost, and it's like, well, if you Google it, it's like, oh, you can use it as rags or whatever, but that just
mhm.
seems still kind of, I mean, not wasteful, but it's like, how many rags do you need?
Yeah. And of course there is like the exception to every rule. I had a few flannel work shirts that had I have a shirt here. It wasn't this shirt, but it was like a shirt shaped like this, and it had slits here and here that were like a stretchy, breathable fabric, so you could like move, like you had more movement in it, and also you had like some ventilation, so you wouldn't overheat. So of course there's exceptions to every rule. It's like don't do this unless you're doing it on purpose.
Unless you know what you're doing, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
which is not me, clearly. So yeah, what else did you want to chat about around this?
Um, yeah, so like I just had two two more like basic things. Um, if you ever get like a hoodie or anything with a string that falls out, super easy way to pop it back in is just put a safety pin on the end of your string and then you can feed it back, just feed the safety pin back through the track. Easy way to like pop it back in and then just like tie a super big knot on the end of your string to get it in. I know we talked a lot about hand sewing, but basic machines can run you as little as $100. And if you're the kind of person who likes to wear your clothes into the ground, it can save you hours of time in repairing your clothes. So it might be a worthy investment. They're not that intimidating. They're not that hard to use. Um, and the I had a note here about replacing pockets. You know, if you get like a pocket on something that like falls off, or you get a hole in the bottom, another use for like the old fabrics, you can cut your own pocket and just sew it back on. Again, just like make sure you're using a similar kind of fabric, and also just make sure you're aware of what's on the inside. My contractor coworker, he actually took like his work coat to a professional dry cleaner, and they sewed through, like they repaired the front pocket and sewed through the entire thing and sewed the inside pocket shut. A professional.
Everyone makes mistakes, I guess, right?
Oh, absolutely. So just like always make sure you know what's going on the other side.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things that I was thinking about when we started this conversation a long time ago about doing this was this idea of resizing clothes.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just trying to imagine like what that actually looks like in practice, because that seems like overwhelmingly difficult. And maybe I'm just overthinking it, or maybe it is really difficult and I'm just not brained for that kind of thing to do.
Well, I mean, it depends how difficult you want to make it, which I'm
Okay.
sure is not a satisfying answer.
Yeah.
Because so there's a few reasons, I guess, like why you'd want to resize something. And it's just either to like to make it fit nicer, or like to basically tailor something. Make it look like more expensive, make it look nicer. Um, and yeah, like I said, it's as hard as you want to make it. Um, so the easiest way to resize something, that's why I brought this shirt downstairs. The easiest way to resize something would be to just flip it inside out, and just like this whole seam, just go, and like let's say you wanted this, you know, about a half inch tighter all the way around. You know, you put it on inside out, you pinned it on yourself. You're like, yeah, I need the sleeves about a half inch. I want the torso about an inch tighter on myself. The easiest way to do it would just be to take this whole seam in like that, and then you trim it, flip it right side out, and it's tighter. Um, a more like professional way of doing that would be to cut cut the sleeve off here. Once you have the sleeve off, you're going to cut the sleeve open down the side. You're going to cut the torso open down the side. Basically, you're going to cut the shirt into pieces and take in every piece. So you're going to like shrink down all of the panels of the shirt and then reassemble it. So it can get a lot more complex.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's as hard as you want to make it. T-shirts, you can definitely just, you know, go like that and it's fine. You know, hemming something is a very easy way of is a very easy like resizing technique. And that's, again, that's something that's like as hard as you want to make it. You can do that by hand. A lot of people do that for their kids, because like you'll have a child and maybe their pants are too long now, but they're going to fit them in 6 months. So you just do a quick hand stitch that you can cut out in 6 months when their pants will fit them again.
Yeah. Yeah, when they got the waiters going on, it's like, okay,
Yeah,
I guess these can come down now.
exactly.
Yeah, so someone asked, how do you hem pants and measure length, leg length properly?
Um, so again, if it's for you, I always like to just put it on inside out and then pin it and walk around and make sure I'm comfortable. Um, if you're trying to hem something for someone else, like if you're going on someone else's measurements, have them measure their inseam, which is from the crotch to the ground, and then go off of that. And if you're doing if you're hemming something for someone, or if you're doing any kind of sewing for anyone, just always make sure that you're accounting for seam allowances. So if someone tells you that their inseam is 30 inches, make sure that you cut the pants to be 31 inches if you know you're going to roll the hem up an inch so that you have the right inseam length.
Cool. Yeah, I hired a tailor once, and I went to a wedding, and someone was like, "Who made your or who put together your suit?" And I was like, "Oh, this guy." And he's like, "I wouldn't go back to him." I'm like, "I think it looks fine." So I don't. It's one of those things. I think you don't know what you're looking for until unless you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So like, if someone were to ask me, like, what length pants do you want to like properly hem, I wouldn't even know like what the answer would be.
Yeah. Yeah, like I had the other weekend I made an outfit for my friend for like a costume party, and I took him to a thrift store and I said, "Find something you like so I can take it apart and make you that with the fabric that you like."
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. So if somebody wants to, I guess, get more into this kind of stuff, are there like, I don't know, like I think about like certain, like this is the Bible of the subject matter. Is there anything like that for like basic stitching, repair, that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say YouTube. I mean,
YouTube.
it's been so long. My aunt taught me pretty much everything I know about basic sewing. My aunt and my grandma taught me, probably about 18, 20 years ago at this point. Um, and YouTube wasn't around then. Um, but I think if you wanted to get started and you don't have that like family connection, I'm sorry, yeah, I would have to look it up to like give a
Sure. I
good
wasn't sure if there's like there may not be a book like that. But I figured maybe there was. That would
I'm
be like, oh,
sure
this is
there
kind
is.
of
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
sure. Okay. Yeah. Someone says Reader's Digest a complete guide to sewing. So that's what we're gonna go with for now. If you're interested in a book, go check out the
Yeah.
Reader's Digest Complete Guide to Sewing. And I'm sure, like you said, there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube. I'm
Mhm.
constantly amazed. I watched this guy on YouTube grow flax and then like process the flax and then like actually put it on a loom. Like the same guy like go from seed to like piece of fabric, piece of linen, like all in one video. Like you can literally find anything. It's
That's
amazing.
amazing. When a few months ago I had COVID and I just spent hours watching YouTube, and I watched someone make like period accurate trip pants, like medieval trip pants, and it was amazing.
So what are trip pants?
Like the bondage style with all the chains
Oh,
and harnesses and
gotcha.
stuff. But she made them out of like wool, like it was a medieval skirt. And I watched the same person like make like basically hand stitch a corset, and I was like, wow, you are so talented.
Yeah, and then they took the time to actually film it and edit it and all that stuff.
Yeah, like she basically like from a piece that is like on display in a museum, she like just took enough photos of this piece and then like recreated it herself.
That's awesome. So someone asked, how do I put punk patches onto a jacket, or like if they bought a Poor Pearls patch, how would they put it on a jacket?
So by hand, it's probably gonna be tough. Just it's gonna be tough because it's thick. I definitely recommend getting like a thimble to help you like push. Sorry, this camera goes like the opposite way of like how I'm used to like backward facing cameras going. I definitely recommend getting a thimble so you could like push the needle through, because a lot of patches these days come with like the iron on backing. So I'm assuming you're going like through a denim jacket or something. Um, and yeah, you just, stitch it up, down, up, down, up, down. Even though it comes with the iron on backing, stitch it also. I don't know, it's safer. I always stitch my patches on. I don't rely on like the iron on glue. You can like iron it on as well for like safekeeping, but just you don't have to like super fine stitch it, but just you know, just up and down, like 1 stitch every like 1/4 inch is perfectly fine for a patch. You don't have to go crazy. The sewing machine that I have, it's a Singer Signature. It's not a super fancy sewing machine, but it has what's called like a free motion foot, which is for like embroidery or quilting, and I use that for sewing on patches because it doesn't try and like move the fabric. It just lets me push the fabric around. So then I just use that for all my patches.
Cool. Someone asked, are thimbles helpful with hand sewing thinner leather, or is there a specific needle that helps with that?
If you're sewing thinner leather, so I know I said earlier about using like the thickest needle you can get away with. If you're sewing thinner leather, I would try and use the thinnest needle you can get away with. And this is probably going to be like a trial and error thing that might end up with a few broken needles. But my reasoning is the thinnest needle you can get away with is probably going to be the sharpest one because it's going to push the least amount of material out of the way. If you're using a big needle, it's probably going to be more blunt and you're going to have to use more force. So you're going to want to use like the smallest needle you can get away with, but you might end up like bending a few needles in the process. So that's why I said it's like a trial and error type thing. And again, if anyone knows, like I held up that red circle, like John before, if anyone knows like how those are sized, I've never seen like size scalings on them. They're always just like small to big in a circle. I don't know.
Very sciencey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever bought one in my life. They just like appear.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you something. You mentioned your sewing machine. Now, I think like we are a part of a culture that is so used to like Amazon and like getting slightly better quality. And it's like, oh, if I'm going to spend $100 on a sewing machine, how much better is the $120, $140? Next thing you know, you're looking at like the $600 sewing machine.
Mhm.
Um, like for 99% of people, is the $100 cheapo whatever sewing machine good enough?
I would say probably yes. Yes. If you're just doing like basic home repairs, absolutely. If you're gonna get into any kind of like hobbying, cosplay, costuming, any kind of like craft, where you're gonna use it more than 20 hours a year, I would say upgrade.
Okay. Someone also said maybe an awl, I don't know what that is, could help with sewing leather.
Oh yeah, that's basically just like a stabby tool. So it
Oh, okay.
makes the holes for you.
Cool. Sounds fun. Get some anger out. Just
Yeah.
stab some leather. Was there anything else you wanted to chat about before I ask you some non-stitch specific questions?
Um, I had a there was like a section about we talked about resizing when it comes to making things smaller. I had a note about making things bigger, which was basically like I talked about when you make things smaller, the harder way is to cut apart all the seams and bring it in. If you want to make something bigger, um, you can try letting out the seams first, and then the more complex way would be to like take out all the seams and then add extra fabric. So like if you wanted to like add extra fabric to like your waistline or something, it's doable, but it's very complex. Um, you got to kind of like make it part of the design, you know,
Yeah, you have to lean
or
into
just
it a bit.
yeah, or just not care what it's gonna look like. Um, and then yeah, just like recycling clothes. If you have like we talked about making shirts into rags. I've made like I'll take my cutting scraps and I'll use them as like stuffing for things. Um, you can take like old t-shirts, turn them into crop tops. I'm sure everyone has seen like DIY videos like that. So there's just like a whole bunch of possibilities when it comes to recycling also. And I
Cool.
also saw I found this like secondhand book on like vertical gardening, and one of the diagrams was like a pair of jeans that the person like filled with dirt and was like hanging up and using as a planter. So the possibilities really are endless.
Yeah, I think I've seen people use jeans to like hold pumpkins and
Yeah.
like tiny pieces of fabric for like instead of string, which I
Hmm.
guess like makes a lot of sense. But then, of course, if you're using working with like polyester, then you're dealing with plastics. So just something
Yeah.
to be aware of. But yeah, so I know what I wanted to ask you a little bit about was I know you make some clothing and sell it.
Yep.
Um, so could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've been, I think I've been, it's probably been about like a year and a half maybe that I've been, selling online. I've been vending more in person this past year now that things have been reopening post COVID. I'm super excited about that. But I'm mostly like lingerie, swimwear, dancewear, stuff like that. Very like bold, bright, sparkly designs.
Cool. Now, is that just because it's stuff you like to make, or is it
Um,
like more complicated, or just curious?
I think it started because it was stuff that I like to wear. Um, but it was stuff that I wanted to wear but couldn't find. And also I like to I'm trying to make things that are truly one size fits most in a flattering way, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it's a cool idea. Bright
And
is
just
not my
very
color.
like,
I'm mostly gray, so
all right. And just very bright, very bold, very like size, gender inclusive.
cool. Now, is that something I've seen you post on Instagram with them, but do you sell them anywhere else?
I have an Etsy store, but that's kind of weird
Not a
right
good
now.
time. Yeah,
Yeah, not a good time for that. I'm in the middle of exploring other options. I've been it we're ramping up for like festival season, so I've been kind of building inventory to sell in person over the spring and summer and fall. So I'm really excited for that.
cool.
And
Uh, go
I
ahead.
live in like the Northeast, so
Yeah, so maybe we'll see you around. So I'm plugging your Instagram, which is at vibe.ryder, Ryder. So you've got some of the stuff up there, plus some of your other work that you do. If people want to throw you a couple bucks, they can do that on Venmo again at Vibe without the dot Ryder, so VIBERYDER. So if folks are enjoying this, want to throw you a couple bucks for your time, definitely would recommend going over there. Anything else you wanted to chat about?
I think that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm less intimidated about sewing. So that's a good thing because I've tried, like I said, I've literally got a stack of flannels that I've just
Mhm.
like, I look at it and then I just pretend I don't see it. And I'm like, oh, I guess I should do that. I guess maybe tomorrow I'll do it. And
I'll
then I
fix
just don't. Yeah.
it.
So maybe I will tackle that pile in the next week or two. We'll say that.
Yeah,
I won't be as confident as saying tomorrow, but maybe in the week, maybe this weekend.
you can do it. I believe in you.
That's the spirit. Miranda, thanks so much. This was really great. For folks that are watching, again, you can find her at vibe.ryder. That's RYDER on Instagram. Are you on Facebook or Twitter or anything else?
I'm on Twitter. It's
Okay.
at Vibe Ryder. No dot.
You're just playing with the dots.
I know.
Don't connect the dots, something like that. Um, so you can find her on Twitter as well. And yeah, any questions from the folks watching? I see there's still quite a few, quite a few of you out there. So if anyone wants to chime in, um, if not, then I will do my whole pitch about Poor Proles Almanac. If you're watching this and you don't know why you are or who we are, we're the Poor Proles Almanac, or I am rather,
Mhm.
along with my co-host. We are a podcast. We've been around now for a couple of years, and we basically focus on thinking about the future and how to build more resilient communities. So we started this Twitch channel where we talk about how to fix stuff and repair stuff and make stuff last longer. And next week we are going to be doing, oh, you know what next week is? Next week is our 420 episode. We're going to do an episode live for 420 on the history of cannabis. So it's going to be really fun. There's literally no reason why you wouldn't want to watch that, I don't think. We're going to watch some old Dare vintage propaganda videos and just like tear them apart. So I definitely think if you are into Twitch, which obviously you are if you're watching this right now, it's definitely up your alley. For the podcast itself, we just released an episode with Charles McBride. He's organizing in Ukraine right now to get medical supplies to folks. So we chat a little bit about what they're seeing on the ground versus what's out in the news and what's on social media and all that good stuff. So it's an interesting conversation on what's today, Tuesday. Tomorrow night, we will be chatting with, who are we talking with? Why don't I remember? We are talking with It's Going Down. So the folks from It's Going Down come on and we talk a little bit about organizing in the modern social media era and how news is organized today. So that'll be a really great conversation. So if that sounds of interest to you, wherever you listen to podcasts, go check out the Poor Proles Almanac. If you enjoyed this, please jump on you can subscribe, or I don't know what the different terms are. Follow and subscribe, I think, on Twitch. I should not be allowed to run technology. So if you guys enjoy this, go on there and do those things, and we'll see you around. So thank you guys so much. Miranda, thank you.
No, thank you so much.
This was a lot of fun.
Yep. Have a great night.